The sky above the burning capital wasn't just falling, it was being erased. A blinding violet fissure tore through the atmosphere as the Titan nullifier charged its primary cannon, a weapon designed to silence entire solar systems. Amidst the deafening roar of collapsing architecture, Corporal Jax Thorne slammed a fresh thermal clip into his rifle, his breathing ragged and harsh against the unnatural hum of the machine god looming over them. He took a step back, his shoulder blades pressing firmly against the smooth, golden armor of the High Matriarch. The contact sent a jolt of electric awareness through him, sharper than the shrapnel wound in his side. Even now, facing annihilation, the proximity of her, a being of pure starlight and calculation, grounded him in a way that defied physics. He could feel the vibration of her power thrumming against his spine, a terrifying and beautiful resonance. Logic dictates surrender, humans dictate otherwise. The matriarch turned her head, her eyes burning like twin suns. She looked at the Titan, then back at the battered soldier who dared to stand beside her. Her voice was a melody composed of solar winds, yet it carried a tremor of something new. Fear? No. Anticipation. "Stand until the stars blink," she whispered, repeating the phrase he had shouted only hours ago. Jax grinned, blood coating his teeth. He reached out, his rough, scarred hand gripping her forearm, grounding the goddess in the grit of the moment. "We don't need a plan, Lyra. We just need to be the one variable they didn't count on." 12 hours earlier, the situation on Helix 4 had been a mathematical certainty of death. Jax was the last man standing in Sector 7. The Krell Ascendancy, massive, hulking brutes that the infantry referred to as Space Orcs, had overrun the perimeter with a savagery that overwhelmed the colony's automated defenses. The air smelled of ozone and scorched earth. Jax crouched behind a fractured barrier, counting his remaining rounds. He was outgunned, outflanked, and cut off from command. By every metric of the Galactic Council, he was already a casualty. But the Council often forgot about the Terran spirit. They viewed combat as an equation where mass times firepower equaled victory. They didn't account for spite. A Krell berserker vaulted the barricade, roaring with the fury of an apex predator certain of its kill. Jax didn't flinch. He didn't have the ammunition to penetrate its kinetic shielding, so he didn't try. Instead, relying on pure human ingenuity, he waited for the split second the beast raised its vibroaxe, exposing the heat vent on its underarm. Jax lunged, jamming a jagged piece of rebar into the vent. Resulting explosion of steam and alien fluids knocked Jax backward, but the beast fell. Panting, Jax scrambled to his feet. More were coming. A sea of them. This was the reality of a Deathworlder. You didn't fight to win. You fought to make the enemy pay for every inch. He grabbed a discarded fusion cell and rigged it to a proximity mine, preparing to turn the narrow alleyway into a choke point. This wasn't the clean, sanitized heroism of a science fiction story. This was messy, desperate survival. Suddenly the roaring of the Krell ceased. The dust motes floating in the air froze in place. The explosion he had just triggered paused mid-bloom, a suspended flower of fire and debris. Silence descended, absolute and heavy, but it wasn't the silence of the void. It was the pressure of a presence. A shimmer of gold light coalesced in the center of the alley. The High Matriarch of the Solari stepped out of the rift, her feet hovering inches above the debris. She was terrifyingly perfect, a creature of energy and logic who viewed time as a suggestion rather than a rule. She surveyed the frozen battlefield, her gaze landing on Jax, who was stuck mid-motion, his finger hovering over the detonator. She released the temporal hold on him alone. Jax stumbled, gasping as time rushed back into his lungs. "Why do you persist?" Her voice echoed directly in his mind, bypassing his ears. "My projections indicated your termination 40 minutes ago. Your survival probability is 0. Jax straightened up, wiping the sweat from his forehead. He looked at the frozen army of Krell, then at the golden entity inspecting him like a lab specimen. He felt a strange pull toward her, a magnetic fascination that overrode his fear. "Chaos is the only weapon they can't calculate," Jax rasped, checking his weapon. "And lady, I'm full of it." The matriarch tilted her head. "The Krell are simply an obstacle. The true threat approaches. A Titan nullifier has entered orbit. I came to salvage the data core, but... She paused, stepping closer to him. The heat radiating from her was intense, like standing next to an open furnace. Yet he didn't pull away. You are a statistical anomaly, human. I'm just stubborn, Jax corrected. She looked at his improvised bomb, then at the defiant set of his jaw. In that moment she saw something the ancient algorithms of her people had missed: HFY, the illogical burning drive that allowed humanity to thrive where others withered. Then prove it, she said, extending a hand that glowed with the power of the captured star. If you wish to defy the numbers, Corporal, you will need more than a bomb. You will need me. Back on the shattered precipice, the memory of that handshake burned brighter than the destruction raining around them. The Titan Nuffalifier had finished its charging cycle. The sphere of antimatter, blacker than deep space, began to detach from the ship's hull, descending toward the colony like a falling moon. Lyra's golden armor fractured, a hairline crack running down her cheek. A single drop of liquid light her blood slid down her face. Jax saw it, and the sight tore something loose in his chest. He didn't care about the physics or the odds. He cared that the most powerful being in the galaxy was breaking herself to keep him alive. Drop the shield, Jax ordered, his voice low and dangerous. Lyra looked at him, her eyes widening. That is suicide. The radiation alone. Drop it. Jax shifted his stance, bracing the stock of his rifle against his shoulder until the metal bit into his flesh. You can't stop that thing with a wall, Lyra. You have to stop it with a spear. Channel everything you have left into my rifle. It was madness. It was human ingenuity at its most reckless. But as the Titan's weapon began to accelerate, Lyra realized that logic had already failed them. Only the chaotic gamble remained. She released the barrier. The heat was instantaneous. Without her protection, the air felt like a physical blow, stripping the breath from Jax's lungs. But before the radiation could dissolve him, Lyra moved. She didn't stand in front of him. She stepped into him, pressing her chest against his back, wrapping her arms around his shoulders, her hands clamping over his own on the rifle. Her essence flooded his veins. It wasn't just energy, it was a terrifying intimacy. He felt the birth of stars and the death of nebulas, but he anchored it all with pure, stubborn Terran spirit. Aim true, Jax Thorne, she whispered against his ear, her voice trembling with the strain. The rifle barrel turned white-hot. Jax didn't aim for the hull. He aimed for the anomaly, the chaotic swirl of energy powering the Titan's weapon. He gritted his teeth, feeling the skin on his hands blister and heal simultaneously under Lyra's touch. Stand until the stars blink, he snarled. He pulled the trigger. The recoil should have shattered his spine. Instead, the combined force of a Solari High Matriarch and a desperate human soldier launched a beam of concentrated havoc that defied the laws of ballistics. The shot pierced the void, bypassing the Titan's shields not through force but through a frequency of sheer unpredictability. It struck the falling antimatter sphere. For a heartbeat the universe held its breath. Then, the sphere inverted. The Titan Nuffalifier didn't explode outward. It imploded, crumpled by its own gravity, consumed by the very nothingness it sought to weaponize. The sky turned a brilliant, blinding white, washing away the Krell fleet in a tide of purification. Jax fell back, his legs finally giving out. He hit the concrete hard, gasping for air that tasted of ozone and victory. Silence returned, but this time it was the silence of awe. Jax blinked the spots from his vision. Lyra was kneeling beside him. She looked exhausted, her golden glow dimmed to a soft twilight, but she was smiling. It was a human expression, new and unpracticed on her immortal features. You bled, Jax rasped, reaching up to wipe the streak of gold from her cheek. She leaned into his touch, her eyes scanning his face as if reading a new axiom. And you survived. It seems we are both defying our nature today. High above, the clouds parted. Several massive crystalline ships descended the Galactic Council. They had come to witness the execution of a colony. Instead, they found a burning ruin and a dead Titan. Lyra stood up, helping Jax to his feet. She kept her hand in his, interlacing her fingers with his dirt-stained ones. When she spoke to the descending judges, her voice was no longer just a melody. It was a decree. Let it be known, she projected, her voice booming across the atmosphere, that this world is under the protection of the Solari. The humans are not merely biomass. They are the chaos that balances our order. They are the apex predator of will. She turned to Jax, the connection between them settling into a steady, warm hum that promised this was only the beginning. Any act of aggression against Earth, she continued, looking directly at the Council's flagship, will be treated as an act of war against me. Jax adjusted his rifle. Standing tall beside the goddess he had taught to bleed, he looked up at the infinite stars, no longer feeling small. Logic suggested they should be dead, but as the Council ships retreated, backing away from the impossible duo, Jax knew the truth. Logic was just a suggestion.